We have a short introduction about the UNECE by Griffiths, followed by introduction about EGS and GSEU by Hollis. Then Slavko Šolar will give an overview about what's UNFC. Guillaume Bertrand about the work of UNFC in the GSEU about critical raw material. Dobnikar about the International Center of Excellence for Sustainable Resource Management. Finally, Serge and Gessel about GeoEnergy application of the UNFC. These are the speakers of today. So I will say that it's time to start. So I would like to give the word to Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Francesco. So good afternoon and greetings from Geneva to everybody. It's a pleasure to be joining with EuroGeos surveys and GSEU, the Geological Service for Europe project, to be together on this webinar. It's a great pleasure for us to be raising the visibility of our work on the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources and our work on sustainable resource management in general. So the UNECE is one of the UN's 5 regional economic commissions, and we have 56 member states that are based in Europe, in the former CIS countries, Central Asia, and Turkey and Israel, plus North America. So we've got a broad range of countries, but importantly, whilst we're the UN Economic Commission for Europe, we do have global mandates for some of our work, and this is the case for our work on sustainable resource management. So I guess I wanted to highlight why sustainable resource management is so important for UNECE. Our region, as our other regions, is very dependent on natural resources for economic development, for human well-being, and for the low carbon and low emission transitions. And we're very aware with COP28 happening in Dubai how important it is that we move to the low carbon and low emission transitions. But however, resource extraction and use pose important challenges. If we think that the world's material footprint is currently at 100 billion tonnes per annum, and this is forecast to double by 2060, and then if you add on that extraction and processing of fuels, materials and food contribute to half of global greenhouse gas emissions and over 90% of biodiversity loss and water stress, this makes our work really important and relevant. So the work of our Sustainable Energy Division that Slavko and I both work for really focuses on developing 2 complementary frameworks, the UNFC that Slavko will talk about, and the United Nations Resource Management System. So these systems are developed by the Expert Group on Resource Management, which is one of the subsidiary bodies of the intergovernmental body, which is our Committee on Sustainable Energy here at UNECE. The Expert Group is a really active group with over 300 members who really contribute to the work on a daily basis or a weekly basis, oftentimes in the evenings and weekends. It's all done on a voluntary basis. A number of those experts are here on the webinar today. And the members represent governments, both UNECE and non-ECE governments, international organisations, industry, civil society, professional societies and organisations, the financial sector, academia, and other UN bodies. So it's a really big and diverse group, but all the stakeholders who are relevant to the work on sustainable resource management are there at the table. The expert group has over 20 working groups and task forces that contribute to the development and implementation of UNFC and the UN Resource Management System. Membership is open to anyone who's interested in our work. And then on the next slide, you will see a bit about the UNFC and UNRMS. So as I said, the expert group develops and supports implementation and adoption of both UNFC and UNRMS. Importantly, they apply to all energy and mineral resources, so both primary and secondary raw materials, to injection projects, as we'll hear from Serge, to groundwater, as we'll hear from Peter. And we're also starting to work on hydrogen, including for hydrogen storage, but also developing a hydrogen classification and taxonomy based on UNFC. There's a focus currently at the moment on applying the systems to critical raw materials and enabling the circularity and resource use. Those are essential for the transition to a net zero economy. We also have a focus on resource servitization, which is a concept that aims to shift the focus from commodities to providing services that meet the needs and expectations of society and customers. Resource servitization is an important concept that creates value for both resource producers and consumers and enhances resource efficiency and security. Importantly, UNRMS incorporates this principle. And as we can see, this is a very busy slide, but it's just really to give you an overview of just how, I guess, how active the expert group is with all the different task forces and working groups. And it has a very active and large bureau comprising a chair and over 22 vice chairs who are representative of a number of UNECE member states, organisations with whom we have an MOU in our work on resource management, and then other relevant partners so that we have a global representation from around the world. So without further ado, I will close with this slide just to say thank you. And we do have our Resource Management Week every year in April. Next year it will be from the 22nd to the 26th of April. So if you're keen to learn even more following this webinar, please come and sign up for our Resource Management Week. Thank you very much, Francesco.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Wonderful overview. Next in line is Julie Hollis, Secretary General of EGS.
Thank you very much, Francesco, and thank you, Charlotte, for those words about UNECE. My name is Julie Hollis. I'm the Secretary General of EGS Surveys, which is a not-for-profit association established more than 50 years ago, and which coordinates a network of 37 geological surveys of Europe. EGS Surveys has 10 scientific expert groups and 2 task forces. The mandate of the National Geological Survey organisations is to understand the geology of their country and collect and provide geological data and advice to serve the government and the public. And at EU level, EGS Surveys aims to do the same by drawing on the expertise of our national level members and applying this at European scale to address the EU policy agenda. Our mission is to enable sustainable and responsible use of the Earth's subsurface environment and resources. And our vision is to establish a geological service for Europe as the foundation of a sustainable future. While the geological survey organisations provide data, information and expertise in mineral raw materials, with an increased focus in recent years on critical raw materials, they also provide the same in geoenergy, including geothermal and related areas, including subsurface storage of hydrogen fuel and carbon dioxide, and also in groundwater quality and quantity, as well as application of geological knowledge to urban environments and to geohazards such as ground instability, subsidence, landslides, flooding and drought. The flagship project of EGS Surveys is the Geological Service for Europe project, GSEU, a 5-year coordination and support action funded by the European Commission and now entering its 2nd year. The project involves 48 partners from 35 countries with the ultimate goal of establishing a permanent geological service for Europe and an expert network based on a harmonised data, information and knowledge base, the European Geological Data Infrastructure, EGDI. The project is developing harmonised pan-European datasets for geoenergy, including geothermal potential and potential for storage of hydrogen and carbon dioxide, groundwater quality and quantity, shallow marine maps for planning of wind farm siting, assessment of coastal zone vulnerability in response to climate change, development of a harmonised framework for geological maps and models, and also, of course, harmonised, up-to-date pan-European maps of raw materials, including critical raw materials. In addition, on the next slide, the project will also develop the framework for an EU International Centre of Excellence for Sustainable Resource Management that will deliver training and support and promotion of the UNFC classification for raw materials. EuroGeoSurveys is a long-lived collaboration between the Geological Surveys of Europe, a collaboration that has led to this point in our evolution where, through our flagship GSEU project, we are closing in on our ambition to provide a permanent, sustainable geological service for Europe to support the EU's green transition goals. The work of our expert network in training, supporting and promoting the application of UNFC, not just in raw materials, but in other critical resources, will be a key part of that geological service for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie, for a nice overview about EGS and GSEU. It's time now to start digging into the content, technical content of this webinar with Slavko. Please, Slavko, show us your slide about what the UNFC.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the word, Francesco. Let me start with breaking news that we just got a few minutes ago. And this is that the Critical Raw Material Act was voted in European Parliament. So this was basically the last part before publishing it. Well, now a few months will be needed for all the translation and everything else, but I think it is done, and we will have an interesting year and the years to come. But let's go to the topic. I am aware that I need to somehow explain in a very simple way what is UNFC. Let's start with the fact that UNFC is an abbreviation for United Nations Framework Classification for Resources. And for next slide, please. For looking at this, we need a bit of broader context. Why do we need that? Why do we need the classification? We need it because we need to manage resources sustainably. We need to manage resources in a way that we would preserve or increase the quality of life. We will decrease the negative impacts, social and environmental. We'll increase the security of supply and responsible use of information, responsible use and production. For all that, we need to have a relevant, consistent, transparent, comparable raw materials information. And we need it in a way that would be broadly understandable. Next slide. So we need to somehow classify, and the challenges of classifying, I think, are very well described in this slide through the picture and through the ways how to classify. How do we put the records, the tapes, or our playlists in order? How do we do this with the resources, and how the EGRM group did this in the past and is still looking at. So with the next slide, this will be very clear. The classification itself is built on the three criteria, fundamental ones, on the so-called three axes. I will start with the G axis, which is degree of confidence, and would actually tell us what do we have, meaning how much we have, of what quality we have. Before, this was called also a geological knowledge X, which would mean that they would tell you about the deposit. In the progress of the classification, this changed to the degree of confidence because we don't have only geological resources, we also have other resources such as wind that we could describe within the UNFC classification. So the first one is what do we have, the second one what we can do with it, and this would be the f-axis, the technical feasibility. What is possible to do, how do we do it, what are the processes, is it also worthwhile to implement this kind of technology that is previewed for the process. That's the second one. And the third one is how we will do it, how we can do it that we take into consideration environmental, social, and all the other economical factors within. So the all three axes are the first part. Next slide, please, are the first part of the classification, which are called categories. Besides the categories, within we have also classes, and the classes will tell you whether we have enough, whether we have sufficient confidence in what we have, whether we have a technical viability, whether we have environmental viability or acceptance in all this. So the classes would be very simple, first three ones: viable, project, potentially viable, something in between, and non-viable. Through that, we can define information that we are getting there. However, this would need to go further down. Next slide, please. That we would also use subclasses. So in a very general terms, in all three axes, we have viability or non-viability or potential viability in questions, and some extras which we would not get into detail. But within which class we have a subclasses which would give you a bit more granular information. For a viable projects, is this project where the production is going on? Is this project just approved for development and this would start? Or is this still in the stage of justified for development? Further down would go on that. Next slide will tell you that this system, in spite of the fact on the very generic high level is very simple, would need to take into account many particularities. So we have several levels of documents, starting with the definition, principles, and specifications, which would be the rules. Both the principles and rules would be mandatory, and the rules would look at the specifications which would go for different resources. We would be using mineral specifications, we would be using anthropogenic resources specifications for the raw materials in question, which is also part of today's webinar. To implement the generic and the specifications, we need guidance, we need ways how to do it. These are non-mandatory and are adaptable to certain commodities. The guidance document that I would expose, of course, is the UNFC Guidance Europe, which would tell how the UNFC can be implemented throughout the Europe itself. On another note, you are all aware that we do have different classifications for different resources. For the raw materials, the most spread are two types of classification. One would be looking at the stock exchange markets and would be based on the Crisco template, and the other one would be national reporting, which would be based on the ex-Soviet system and was used in the past quite extensively for a national level reporting. With the next slide, I'm just showing few examples how these bridging documents were already created. From the Chinese bridging document on the upper left to the lower left, the ex-Soviet system, and the lower right would be the Crisco-based template. It's important to say that the bridging between the Crisco template and the UNFC was recently completed and is ready to be used in the next couple of months, just after the final formal approval from the EGRM group. Next slide, please. So all this classification needs to have a user. Without that, we didn't do much. And we have quite a few groups of users. I would put governments on the top of it. I would also expose the use in industry for different purposes. Within a company, for example, you could classify your information not only for the raw materials that company might be dealing with, but also with the water that would be in a company or the energy sources. The next important one would be the financial community, which would be looking at the information whether or not to invest in the project. The part that we should not overlook is the social society, because we are aware of the low social acceptance of the raw materials project in itself. Last but not least are the experts who are advancing the use of UNFC, developing further, looking at the details that are needed and trying to adapt to the needs of the user. Just the end sentence would be that the user of UNFC is in the center, and being in the center would also require the responsibility to provide the proper set of information to be classified according to UNFC. With that, I would thank you for the attention and be open for the questions.
Thank you very much, Slavko. We'll see you back later when we have the panel discussion. The next presentation, Guillaume Bertrand is going to show us the work of GSEU critical raw material at the UNFC.
Thank you very much, Francesco. I'm very happy to be here. I'm saying that because I am very happy to be here and because I have a few technical problems to connect to the meeting, so I was afraid I wouldn't make it. So thank you very much, Francesco, for your technical assistance. All right. I'm Guillaume Bertrand. I'm from BRGM, French Geological Survey, and I'm the coordinator of the work package of the GSEU project on mineral resources. So I have a few minutes to explain why UNFC is important for mineral resources. Thank you. All right, critical raw materials. Supply of critical raw materials are a challenge. Well, actually, it's a challenging answer to challenges and transition we are facing in our modern world. We were more than ever aware of that since for the last year with the COVID-19 crisis, the Russian invasion in Ukraine, etc., etc. I think there is a global agreement that the climate change imposes to reduce the greenhouse gases and to develop renewable energies. But this is a very important shift in our energy model. And this energy transition is material intensive. For example, it takes 6 times more critical raw materials for an electric vehicle than for a conventional vehicle. It's the same, it takes 6 times more critical raw material to produce the same amount of energy from offshore wind than from coal. And also, in addition to this energy transition, the exponential development of the digital transition relies also on an increasing consumption of energy that should be also decarbonized, and materials to produce the networks, to produce the data centers, to produce the devices that we're using more and more. So the point is that the demand for critical raw material is increasing strongly, and it's not a peak effect. It will keep increasing in the future in response to the combined effects of the energy transition, to the digital transition, to the increase in the world population, and also to the economic growth. So what is the situation in Europe? Well, the fact is that the European industry strongly depends on importation from third countries for many critical raw materials. And this is a threat for the European sovereignty. For instance, almost 80% of the lithium we're using in Europe comes from Chile. It's even higher for several rare earth elements that are produced in China for 100% for some of them. So it's a threat, and in an unstable geopolitical world, the European Union needs to secure its supplies in critical raw materials. And that goes through relocating the extraction and the processing in European countries, increasing the recycling and the secondary resources, and also cooperation with producing countries, like-minded countries. The good point is that the awareness of the threats has been increasing for some times now, and the European Union is taking actions with ambitious goals. And Slavko just mentioned the Critical Raw Materials Act. That is one of them, and probably the most visible right now. So this act that has just been voted by the European Parliament, it aims to strengthen all stages of the CRM value chain, to diversify the CRM imports, to reduce the threats caused by the strategic dependencies, to improve the EU capacity to monitor and to mitigate risks of disruptions to its supply, and to improve circularity and sustainability. The point is that this act proposed very ambitious benchmarks of 10% of EU's annual consumptions in terms of extractions, EU processing amounting to 40% of its annual consumption, recycling of 15% of its annual consumption, and external sources not concentrated to more than 65% to single third countries. And this is by year 2030, in 7 years from now. And in the mining world, 7 years, it's tomorrow. So it's very ambitious. So for that, we need to activate and to benefit from all the tools that are available. And I strongly believe that UNFC is a very important one. In the CRM Act, UNFC is explicitly mentioned in the text of the CRM Act. It's actually explicitly mentioned 4 times. It's mentioned to classify a strategic project for their application to the Commission. It's mentioned for the reporting of national exploration program results. It's mentioned for the risk monitoring of new projects, and it's also mentioned for reporting on extractive waste facilities. So to summarize this, I could say that UNFC is important because according to this CRM Act, we'll have to use UNFC. But I strongly believe that we'll not use UNFC because we have to, but we'll use UNFC because it's a useful tool. And that's what I'm trying to summarize in that slide. It's useful and it's important to compare projects for different types of resources. It's important to classify projects along different steps of the value chain, from exploration to recycling. it's important also to assess environmental, economic, social performance of the projects. It's important to monitor the development or the maturity of the project, because if we have to reach milestones or benchmarks in 7 years from now, we have to be quick in developing projects. It's also important to transpose information from different range of reporting system. Slavko talked about the bridging documents. In that way, I see UNFC as a kind of common language. And also, it's important to mention that UNFC is simple to use, and that using new UNFC doesn't impose a strong burden to users. And I think that's it for this quick presentation, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
We are running into the last 2 short presentations before we dive into the Q&A session. So the next presentation is Metan is going to tell us the plan about the International Center of Excellence.
Yes, thank you, Francesco, very much. My name is Meta Dobnikar. I'm coming from Geological Survey of Slovenia. And within the GSEU project, I am leading the task of the establishment of the EU International Center of Excellence on Sustainable Resource Management, which has been already presented by Julie. So the Center of Excellence is going to be established within the Geological Service for Europe. Its establishment is planned during the ongoing project of Geological Service for Europe. And it is going to be a capacity building and knowledge center in support of UNFC and UNRMS. We aim to build that center to implement our tasks through networks of experts, through networks of partners, stakeholders, by establishing a knowledge platform, and of course with capacity building and promotion, and all that to support policy on resource management at different levels, at European, national, and regional level. Of course, we aim to follow the criteria of designation from UNECE and to become a part of the network of international centers of excellence for sustainable resource management that are being established globally. Why would we like to establish a Center of Excellence on Sustainable Resource Management in Europe? Europe has set to itself quite high goals with its commitment to Sustainable Development Goals implementation that reflect through the European Green Deal and digital transition. And all this is now coming into legislation with the Net Zero Industry Act and with the Critical Raw Materials Act we have already heard about. And this is the first, let's say, focus of our group that is establishing the Center of Excellence to work on. So the activities of the Center of Excellence, although the center has not yet been established, are focused, the first activities of the center are focused to capacity building, to trainings. Within the project, we established that there is a lot of knowledge on UNFC between our partners, mostly geological survey organizations, but still there are some discrepancies and that we have only few really experts working on this. So the plan is to start with training the trainers, and the aim is to have in every our partner organization trained 1 to 2 persons that would be able to then train in UNFC further on at national level. So we are now at the moment of preparing of training materials, and at the beginning of next year we will start with the trainings of the trainers who will further be able to perform trainings at national levels. Aside, of course, we are also working on the promotion of UNFC and UNRMS, and also on the ICE SRM networking by connecting to other centers of excellence. At the same time, our activities are also focused to the building of the EU ICE SRM IT platform, which would be like a one-stop shop with all the information on UNFC, UNRMS, but also on critical raw materials and other resources, and would be support to our different stakeholders from policymakers to broader public. This would be in short from my side. I hope I also answered to Marina's question. The trainings of our center in establishment will be first focused to our partner organization, to geological survey organizations, and then regarding if they will be mandatory to be a competent person, maybe this question would better be answered from Slavko or from Charlotte. That would be all, and I'm of course open for further questions. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Meta. Thank you very much for your presentation. Last but definitely not the least, Serge.
So my name is Serge Gessel. I'm Chief Advisor at TNO Geological Survey of the Netherlands, and I'm also chairing the UNFC Injection Projects Working Group. You can go to the first slide, and where I would like to address the sustainable geoenergy resources that we are also mapping in the geological services for Europe. And when we talk about sustainable geoenergy resources, we talk about geothermal energy. And we talk about the potential to store energy in the subsurface, which could be, for example, green hydrogen or heat and cold. And we talk about the possibility to store CO2 for permanent storage in the subsurface. Now, all these three technologies are intrinsically supported in the European policies on energy and climate, and there's many documents that are also explaining the importance of these technologies. They are also important for the Sustainable Development Goals, and I would like to express in this energy trilemma also why they are and how they can contribute. First of all, they support sustainability by either removing greenhouse gas emissions, but also by deploying low and zero carbon energy technologies. What is very important is the security of supply. While Europe is still using fossil resources, we are also increasingly dependent on import from other countries. By deploying renewable energy sources and clean energy sources, we can also increase our own domestic supply. And with energy storage, we can ensure that we have strategic supply of energy through seasonal variations. And it is also contributing to the affordability of energy. For example, we can support grid services with energy storage, but we can also provide more efficient integration of renewables and also provide low cost base load heat. If you go to the next slide, we can see that these types of energy sources are also included in the UNFC system. So we have one for geothermal energy and one for storage projects, injection and storage projects. Besides that, there is also a petroleum system. So what is the typical challenges that we have? Well, first of all, there's often high upfront development costs for these kind of technologies. You have to drill deep in the earth to deploy these technologies. There's also long project development timelines because you have to go through exploration stages. And even also for early phases of exploration, there's a higher risk because you still need to learn a lot about the resources in the subsurface. And that is related to also the fact that many parts of Europe, there is still an insufficient level of resource mapping. And this is where Geological Services for Europe is really taking a part. Last but not least, there is a insufficient societal embeddedness. So many of these technologies are still facing also a lot of public objection, and there's also often still development needed in the regulatory system. Now, if you look at UNFC and also the related UN resource management system, these are really coming into place to solve these kind of challenges. First of all, UNFC and UNRMS allow us to compare and monitor different types of energy sources in one system. And I think that's a very important thing that we have. Also, we can evaluate these geological resources in a full energy system value chain. For example, how can we connect the production of wind and solar to energy storage capacities in the subsurface? And we can also look at the dependencies. It was also already mentioned that critical raw materials are important also for the development of renewable technologies, but also we can look at the reuse of previous extraction projects, for example, where salt has been mined or where petroleum resources have been mined. And these places in the subsurface can be used to store CO2 or energy. The UNFC system also helps us to identify the social and the environmental barriers. And this is really critical also for the successful development. So we can really identify where and how these barriers are existing and how we can resolve them. And that is also related to the last part. We are talking about prospective resources. We need to identify where these resources are through drilling and exploration. And even in the prospective phase, we can identify how we can enable and de-risk these options. For example, the technical feasibility, but also by reducing the geological uncertainties and addressing the confidence levels for deploying prospective resources. So this is in a nutshell why UNFC is very important also for geoenergy resources and why we are also looking how to include this system in our Geological Service for Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Serge. I would like to ask all the presenters to turn on their camera now so we can have a lovely discussion. We have 100 people online. So, and there is already a question from George that I would like to start from. So UNFC is a classification system for the viability and feasibility of projects. So why are we saying that it's a system for classifying resources? Who would like to jump on this question? You can also read it in the chat.
If I may start with a shorter UNFC history than Charlotte, and she would add probably. The UNFC started to develop as the classification for coal, oil and gas and the other metals at the beginning of 90s, so some 30 years ago. And it was strictly looking at the classification for resources. Through its development, it took into account the timeline. And for the timeline, it is way more convenient to use the project than the resources. So, and now it is looking in the all kind of projects for the resources, I would say. And the terminology might be changed in the future, but at the moment, I would say it would stay as it is, because it is also already a brand. Maybe Charlotte, you want to add some?
Thank you for the question, George. Sorry, I've got a bit of an echo. So yeah, fully support what Slavko said, and yeah, the system was developed originally for solid fuels and mineral commodities, then it was extended to oil and gas, and then uranium, nuclear fuel resources, and then, you know, to be able to extend it to make it comparable and applicable to renewable energy resources and to injection projects, etc. It moved to being a project-based classification system, because a renewable energy project, for example, if you've got a wind farm, or, you know, there's a lifetime for the equipment, or for a solar farm, you've got a lifetime that you're leasing the land for, etc. So that the move to the project-based system allows it all to be comparable, and that's what brings the added value for the system. I hope that answers your question, George. If not, please let us know and we can expand further. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. While we are waiting for other questions, I'd like to jump on something that both Slavko and Serge mentioned during their talk, and is about social acceptability of, for example, the mine industry, but also the new, let's say, exploitation of the subsurface for energy purposes. Can you give us a couple of practical examples of how the UNFC will help increase the social acceptance of mining industry or geothermal, you name it?
Would you like me to start, Francesco?
Sure.
Yeah, I think what we see is that at the moment, the deployment of geoenergy resources in the deep subsurface faces various challenges. So first of all, the societal acceptability, and also the way people are looking at risks, or how risks are perceived. And there's also a need for, let's say, enough measures to handle these kind of impacts. So through the system, you can see whether resources are already really having a good regulatory system, for example, to manage risks. If that is not in place for a project, you could identify that it's still not mature enough, or if it is still investigating what level of risks are there. And this is something that could be one of the barriers to a system, or it could be that a project is very close to a fault, for example, if you talk about geothermal energy. So if you have the seismicity issues, you can already address this early in the project and see if this is a barrier, and if additional regulatory measures would be needed to let the project become alive. And furthermore, we can also see that in the system it identifies that, for example, certain policies do not allow certain projects. We can identify why a project can maybe not mature because there are regulatory barriers in that direction. So there's a lot of examples that you can see, both on the environmental, the economic, and the societal level, that you want to identify why is a project maybe not going to maturation while it is technically mature. And I think that's very important to identify these parts and to see if there is a action perspective for any stakeholder in that sense, to maybe resolve those barriers and have a really focused action there. Yeah.
Thank you, Serge. Slavko, Guillaume, Meta, you want to add something?
Well, maybe just short on the social acceptability, which is the big issue, and it's hampering the supply. In many ways. UNFC classification is giving simple, transparent information on that level, and it would be looking at the social acceptance or agreement. Of course, the granularity of the information will be determined by the user, and the user will actually define what is actually the information that is needed to state that the project is viable, meaning socially acceptable. or not, or something in between. And with that, I would also like to stress the role of the user and coming back on the competent person issue. So what is in the UNFC sets of documents is also the discussion on and decision actually on the issue of the competency. And the UNFC system would put the user in the center, so the user will be the one defined who is what is called a qualified expert to do that. For all the trainings and all the efforts, the user will need actually to maybe say a credit or mandate certain entity or certain group of certain network of experts or certain experts that would be able to aid, train, provide information for their system. So I would stop here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Slavko. There is a new question in the chat, and I would like to address this question to Julie, because it's mentioned that Jorge is asking which is the role of geological survey.
Thank you. Well, I think as others have probably quite rightly pointed out, and including Meta, of course, the geological surveys in Europe really are the largest network of experts in UNFC. So this is the group of people who have the capacity to develop the training and promotion and implementation, and to share that with those who will need it. And that I guess the focus through the project is particularly on raw materials, but it's not just raw materials, of course. It's also a number of other areas, and many of our experts in the geological surveys, like Serge, for example, are active in the expert working groups, working with UNFC on development of guidelines and so on. So there's a very strong role. There's also, of course, the recognition in the Critical Raw Materials Act of the role of the surveys more generally in providing data and advice related to critical raw materials in Europe. And so they're named in the Act as the agencies who have the mandate and they have the expertise, they have the data in order to be able to supply that information at EU level. And importantly, UNFC, of course, is also named in the Act. So the combination of those things give the geological surveys and the experts in the surveys a fairly central role, I believe, in the development of implementing UNFC. I don't know if anyone else would like to add anything there.
If not, I'd like to move to Charlotte and Meta. I do have a question about the International Center of Excellence. So I would like to ask Charlotte if there are any other in the world, and how does it work, the collaboration with them? And then Meta later can also maybe mention when the European one will be started.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you very much for the question. So yes, the International Centres of Excellence on Sustainable Resource Management, they are independent bodies, independent entities, self-funded. There's one been established a number of years ago in Moscow that was originally established for Eurasia. It's now more focused on the BRICS countries. A second one has been established in Mexico for Latin America. There's a Centre of Excellence on Sustainable Resource Management, particularly with a focus on circularity, on the circular economy, that's currently being established in the UK. We've just had an extra budgetary project approved by our executive committee to support that centre, based on UNRMS as well. There's also interest from Southeast Asia to establish a centre. So there's a number of these centres being established around the world. Once we have, I guess, a critical mass, maybe 4 or 5 centres, there's an intention from UNECE to establish a network of these centres, so that we're preparing a generic memorandum of understanding that will be presented to our member states, and then each centre that essentially delivers on what the criteria are for being a centre of excellence, they will be eligible to be, signed up for the MOU. And then that's where the value of these centres will really come in, because we will be establishing this network, which will be an exchange of information, a cooperation, collaboration on what are the best practices, what works, and also on what doesn't work. And obviously each centre will be focused either on national or regional priorities, differences. There's always not one size that fits all, but there is a lot of value in this network, in being able to exchange information and knowledge, and also sharing training materials, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte. Meta, what about the European one?
Yeah, thank you, Francesco, for the question. Though it's quite a complex answer to your question. The European Centre of Excellence, of course, aims to cover European Union and also the European neighboring countries. It is going to be established within the Geological Service for Europe, so it's still a way to go, because it's not, let's say, so simple to establish an entity within another entity, and we need to figure it out how, or we have to plan it, sort it out how in the future. But nevertheless, we know very well what is our aim, what we want to do, and we already started with our activities. So the center actually will develop through its activities and will become a formal established entity somewhere towards the end of the ongoing project of GSEU.
Thank you, Meta. There is extra two questions in the chat. So one is, I will say, for Slavko and Charlotte. The first one for Sichang is asking how the UNSC enhanced the implementation on UNFC at operational and local level to let projects be objectively analyzed and classified to a proper category.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I believe that Meta and Charlotte already start answering this. UNECE is not in a position to oversee the implementation of UNFC on the local level and very operational. And this is why the instruments of Centers of Excellence was established and is very well developing throughout the world on the different resources as such. So that is the idea, that operational part of UNFC would be done by the Centers of Excellence. The network of the Centers of Excellence would look for compliance among the Centers of Excellence and, of course, among the work and the development of UNFC as such. To that end, we would be looking at the group of people that would work together with the centers to look at the compliance issue, to look at the quality issues, so that the centers among themselves would be aligned. And of course, they would need to be aligned according to the needs of the user. Each of the centers would need to have a user that would actually use the services, the classification, let's say, expertise on certain area of or resources in the certain territory. So I will stop here. Thank you. Charlotte?
No, fully support.
Yeah.
Fully support what Slavko just said. It's a good question, and I think again it also goes back to what Slavko was saying about the user. It's up to the user of the information to decide what she wants, etc. So and these centres of excellence will play a key role. The UNECE has helped develop the UNFC and the UNRMS. These are now public goods. We're not here to police. That's not the role of UNECE. these are deliberately voluntary standards, so it's up to any country that wishes to legislate it, or as we've seen, the European Commission has legislated it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Very clear. I think we are getting to the end of our webinar, but before say goodbye to the audience and thank you to the 5 of you, I would like to have like a short round from you. Can you state in a concise way what will be like a benefit for a member state to adopt and push for the UNFC classification?
Yes, I can go first.
Sure,
it's not like here, Slavko and I are in the same meeting room. Apologies. So yeah, I think the benefits are many. You know, having harmonized information at national level and being able to compare and contrast, you know, with other countries and regions is an important benefit, but also understanding, you know, the social and environmental barriers to progressing an important project and being able to compare projects. So, for example, is this renewable energy project, is this wind farm the best project to be going forward with in this specific area, or is it a gas plant with CCUS? There are a range of benefits. So I'll hand over to Slavko.
Well, that was a bit fast. I was just writing down the answer, but I would say that UNFC has the potential to respond to the broader social needs for the information in order to decide whether or not to proceed with the project on resources. It looks at the SDGs, which are the baseline of the modern world, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Slavko. Serge, Guillaume, Meta, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I think what I would like to address here is that we have a lot of challenges before us in 2050, and that's around the corner for me. And there are so many barriers to really resolve these challenges. And I think by really monitoring where the successes are, but also monitoring where we have the barriers, that we can really act on it. And I think also what Charlotte says, the integratedness of everything is very important. I would say there's only one system that looks at the full integration of everything across the life cycle of any of these technologies. So that's for me an important reason to promote UNFC.
Thank you, Serge.
Yeah, well, if I should condense all the benefits, there are many of UNFC in 3 words. I would say it's to save time, because, well, we saw that in the CRM Act, we have benchmarks by 2030. In the mining world, the average time from greenfield exploration to production is 17 years. So if we wish to reach to meet these benchmarks objectives in 7 years, we cannot rely on the deposits that we will discover in the future. So we need these tools. Actually, the good example is that at the beginning of the COVID-19, we thought it would take 5, 6, 8, 10 years to develop a new vaccination. It was done in 18 months, actually. So I think if we use the proper tool, and UNFC is definitely one of them, we can speed up the process, and we can meet the benchmark. And UNFC is a great tool for that, in my opinion, for mineral resources.
Thank you, Guillaume. Meta, you have the unfair task of saying something after the 4 of them already made a statement.
Sorry, Meta.
yeah, it's an unfair task, but anyway, I couldn't more than agree with what my previous co-speakers said. So it's but if I would choose one, I would really go for what Guillaume said. It could speed up the processes that we desperately need. It's a good tool that we need to use in the future.
Thank you, Meta. With this, I would like again to thank our speaker and panelists. They were really a nice conversation, nice presentation. Thank very much to everybody that stayed with us until the end. And soon you'll be able to find the recording of this webinar on EGS, GSEU, and UNFC communication channel. Have a very nice rest of the day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.